going to tell you guys a story today. And have you guys ever heard of the brothers Grimm? Some of you have. Some of you might have.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, well, the Grimm brothers, their names were Jacob and Wilhelm, and they lived in Germany in the 1800s. And they decided that they wanted to collect all of the stories that people told. They weren't written down yet for the most part, so they collected all these stories and they wrote them down, and they didn't make them up, but they're responsible for the fact that we know them today. Stories like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Hansel and Gretel. You guys have heard of those, right? Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you a story that you might not have heard of before. It's called Jorinda and Joringel. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a castle in the forest, and an old woman lived there. She was a sorceress of the dark arts. Do you guys know what a sorceress is? Yeah, okay, good. So, if anyone came within 100 paces of the castle, they would be frozen on the spot, and they couldn't move until the sorceress set them free again. If it was an innocent young maiden who came within the 100 paces, she would turn into a bird, and the sorceress would come and put her in a cage, put her in a special room in her castle where she had 7,000 birds. Now, living nearby, there was a beautiful young woman named Jorinda, and she was engaged to a handsome young man named Joringel. They were very much in love, and they decided to go on a walk in the forest so that they could be alone. "Be careful," said Joringel. "Don't get too close to the castle." So it was a beautiful evening, and the sun was slanting through the low-lying trees, and there was a turtle dove singing mournfully in the branches of a beech tree. Suddenly, they realized that they were lost. They had no idea how to get home. Jorinda sat down in the sunshine, and she began to cry. And Joringel began to weep too. They were so upset, they felt that they might die. And the sun had set, and they were very scared. Joringel looked through the trees, and he saw, not very far away, the wall of the castle. Jorinda began to sing, "My little bird with the little red ring, sadly, sadly, sadly sings. Mourns the dove who now is dead, sings sadly, sadly, click, click, click." Joringel turned to look at her, but she had turned into a nightingale. She sang, "We click, we click, we click, click, click." Just then, an owl came swooping through the trees, and it flew 3 times around Jorinda, each time crying, "Shoo-hoo! Shoo-hoo! Shoo-hoo!" Joringel found that he was frozen to the spot. He couldn't move, he couldn't say anything. And at this time, the sun had set. The owl flew into some bushes, and immediately out walked a buckled-over little old woman. She was jaundiced, and she was thin, and she had huge red eyes, and a nose that reached almost to her chin. She came and she scooped up the nightingale, and she put it in a cage, and she left. And there was Joringel, frozen to the spot. So he waited, and he waited, and eventually the old woman came back. And she looked at him, and she said, "When the moon shines on the cage, set him free." And then he could move again. Well, he fell on his knees in front of the old woman, and he begged her to let him have his Jorinda back. But she wouldn't do it. She said, "You will never see her again, ever." And she left. Joringel was completely distraught. He cried and he moaned, but it was all in vain. So he left the forest, and he went to a nearby village that he had never been before. And he got a job keeping their sheep. And he lived there for many years, and he would often go walking in the forest. But he was very careful to keep a safe distance from the castle. One night he was home in bed asleep, and he had a dream. He dreamed that he found a blood-red flower with a beautiful pearl in the middle of it. and he took it to the castle, and everything he touched with it was released from its spell. And that was how he got his Jorinda back. So the next morning when he woke up, he went searching for the flower. He searched high and low through mountains and valleys, and on the 9th day, he found a blood-red flower with a dewdrop as big as a beautiful pearl right in the center of it. So he plucked the flower, and he walked night and day until he got to the castle. He walked within 100 paces, but he didn't freeze. So he walked right up to the gate, and he touched it with the flower, and it sprang open. He went into the courtyard, and he started listening for the sounds of the 7,000 birds. And he found the chamber in the castle where the old woman was feeding the birds. And when she saw him, she was very angry, and she spat poison and gall at him, but she couldn't get within 2 steps of him. So he started looking through all the cages, but there were hundreds of nightingales. "How will I ever find my Jorinda?" he said. But as he was looking, he saw out of the corner of his eye the old woman very sneakily grab a basket and head to the door. So he went after her, and he touched the cage and the woman with the flower, and immediately she could no longer cast spells on anything. And his Jorinda appeared before him as beautiful as before, and she wrapped him in her arms. And then they took the flower and they turned all of the birds back into maidens.
That would take a long time.
It would. There were 7,000 of them. But they turned all of them back into maidens, and then Jorinda and Joringel went home together, and they lived happily ever after. Had you guys ever heard that story before?
No.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was nice. Interesting.
What did you think of the young women being turned into birds?
It was kind of odd, because, it was what? I just not that much of I just call me Uncle, not really.
You're not into magic?
Yeah.
Why do you think the old woman would want to collect all those birds in her castle?
She wanted them to sing her.
She wanted them to sing to her? What do you think?
She was a bird watcher.
She's a major bird watcher, wasn't she?
More of a bird starer.
A bird starer.
Staring.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you guys for listening to my story. I hope you guys enjoyed it.